Adesso è la volta del dottor Bertrand de La Chapelle, which is the representative of the French government in the high-level group of the European Union about internet governance. Europe is doing a lot in this field concerning not only internet today, but future internet. Future internet will be the argument, and must be understood as the net that will come. So the word is to you.
Grazie. Mi piace molto di essere qui. Contrario a Marcus, non posso fare la presentazione in italiano, mi dispiace. Che preferisce che fanno la presentazione in francese o in inglese? Okay. Okay, so I wanted to ask before, but English is fine. Fortunately, it's the way I prepared it, so it's good. I'm the special envoy for the Information Society in the French Foreign Affairs Ministry, and as been said before, I'm the French representative in the European coordination space. I'm the French representative also in the Governmental Advisory Committee of ICANN and in the IGF. I wanted to highlight two major elements because the coming year is going to be a very important year in terms of the institutional evolution of the internet governance structures. And I would actually like to address quickly, on the one hand, the IGF, and on the other hand, a few words about ICANN and its evolution. The first element is, as Marcus said, regarding the IGF, it is a unique experiment because of the equal footing of participation of the different actors. I won't delve into details, but when we say multi-stakeholder governance, it raises a lot of discussions and a lot of questions regarding the respective roles of the governments, the civil society, the private sector actors, and the international organizations. I frequently mention that the IGF at the global level is a sort of annual watering hole, a place where all the different actors involved in processes regarding internet governance are actually coming together and exchanging where they are in their respective processes. The purpose is not, as Marcus said, to get an agreement, because in most cases there is no single answer to the question. But the challenge is to allow everybody to be really aware of what the others are doing and of the processes that are happening in other spaces than the ones that they are involved in. The interesting function of the IGF is actually a dynamic agenda setting process. Those of you who followed the World Summit on the Information Society know that we now have a very nice list of themes called the Geneva Plan of Action. Actually, it's more an agenda than a plan of action, but never mind. The thing is that this list was set in 2003. And whenever there is a discussion in the traditional intergovernmental spaces, there is no way you can change a single word in this list, because this has been adopted by the heads of state and government. And there's no doubt that since 2003, the challenges have somewhat evolved, and maybe we wouldn't word the same problems in the same way. The IGF has a major function in allowing the clustering, reclustering, and redefinition of this agenda in a dynamic manner. And in this respect, I would like to highlight quickly two issues that will be very high on the agenda this year in Sharm el-Sheikh. One is the emergence of social media, let's say social networks, user-generated content, microblogging. All these applications are actually, in a certain way, bringing almost a third layer on the global network. We had the internet that allowed machines to communicate with one another. Then we got the web that allows individuals to communicate with databases. Now we have the social web, social graph, social grid, whatever you call it, that is allowing more and more people to communicate with people around their own social graph, their own social network. This is raising a certain number of new issues, or rather, putting old issues in a new light. If you look at privacy, if you look at freedom of expression, if you look at copyright, these are not new issues. We know them in media, in traditional media. The reality is that the social web is bringing those issues in a different light. And several sessions, workshops, and plenary sessions in Sharm el-Sheikh are going to address this dimension of social media and the policy challenges that it brings. To give you just a hint, during the Eurodig, the European IGF that took place a month ago in Geneva, a long discussion took place on the evolution of the terms of use or terms of service of social networks and how they represent somehow the law of the social network itself. And the question of how they are defined, is it just a commercial document or is there more policy behind it, is a typical example of the discussion that is going to emerge in Sharm el-Sheikh. The second issue is the evolution of ICANN, the so-called critical internet resources topic, and I will come to that later in the second part. But there is, beyond these themes, there is a process thread in Sharm el-Sheikh. And this process thread is about the future of the IGF itself and the emergence of this network of national and regional IGFs. The evolution of the IGF itself is the whole question about continuation or non-continuation. There will be a whole session devoted to this. France, the French government, strongly supports the continuation of the IGF, as I think the most European governments also do. This is a discussion that will take place next year, but also in Sharm el-Sheikh. And it is important that in Sharm el-Sheikh during that session, as many voices as possible express why they think the IGF is useful. And if I were to take only one illustration of the usefulness of the IGF, I would actually say that the spread and the development of national and regional IGFs is a clear illustration that people find a benefit in this. We wouldn't be setting up national meetings and regional meetings if we didn't find that the international one was bringing a new way of interaction. Another element that I can give as an example of the impact of the IGF is a very concrete question. During the Eurodig last year, there was a comment made by somebody coming from Armenia. And this person just said, you know, we have a problem connecting to the backbone, because if it comes through Georgia, they are filtering what comes from Russia. If we connect through Turkey, they are filtering anything that has to do with Armenia, and the only other alternative is going through Iran. This led, just this informal discussion, to a concept that the Council of Europe picked up and said, well, isn't there some concept there that basically, as a government, you have the right to regulate what comes out on your territory, provided that there's due process. But anything that goes through your territory, coming from another one to another country, maybe you should make it free and make it free to circulate. And this is leading next week, at the end of this week, to a specific workshop in the Council of Europe on the idea of some kind of instrument to establish this principle. This is a direct outcome. This is not something that has been negotiated in the IGF. It's something that has emerged as an issue in the IGF. And so the main challenge regarding the IGF is not to make it produce more negotiated documents. This should be a wrong way forward. The question is how to improve the relationship between the different structures that participate in this sort of emerging internet governance network. If you think about it, any single national, regional, transnational business-oriented or civil society group that deals with internet governance issues is part of a network interacting and sending information and gathering information about the policy issues. On the desk outside of the W3C, there is a very interesting document regarding a workshop they did in January on social networks. And there's no doubt that we will try to bring this information inside the discussions in Sharm el-Sheikh. The key challenge is, how do you manage to make the information circulate from the national to the regional to the global and back around? If I want to make a sort of a joke, I see the IGF at the global level almost as a AC-DC converter. You have some geographic aggregation that comes from the national and the regional into the international, and what the international spins out is themes, a sort of common agenda. It converts geographically based concerns into common agenda that allows everybody to interact and know who is dealing with what issue. So it's basically providing an agenda setting at the global level, an agenda setting function at the global level. This is about the IGF. I want to finish quickly with a few words about ICANN. You may know that a couple of days ago, the agreement that was connecting ICANN to the Department of Commerce ended and has been replaced by something called an affirmation of commitment. I won't launch into an in-depth analysis of the changes because this would be the subject of a whole session. I want to highlight quickly a few points. First, the French government does welcome the step forward that this affirmation of commitment represents. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Bernard Kouchner, and the the French Minister for the Digital Economy, Nathalie Kosciusko-Morizet, made a declaration 2 days ago highlighting the positive step that this new framework represents. So, in particular, we like the fact that the affirmation of commitment reaffirms clearly the public interest dimension of the mission of ICANN and ICANN's enhanced responsibility in moving forward in an institutional framework. The second thing I want to highlight is people usually ask, how big a change does this new agreement make? And the answer is actually, it is a matter of trajectory. If you take a cannon, you may change just slightly the aim, but when it fires, the place where the shell falls is completely different, even if the change at the beginning is very small. This agreement is not fundamentally different from the previous ones, but where it is different is completely changing the trajectory, and in particular, it is giving the responsibility to the community at large, including other governments, to review the performance of ICANN, whereas in the past it was the only responsibility of the US government. And finally, this gives all of us in the ICANN space, but also outside, a huge responsibility in the months to come. The next months, up to mid-2010, will have to be devoted strongly to the institutional evolution of ICANN. And there is a need, this is part of what the French declaration said, a need for an inclusive process to discuss the institutional evolution of ICANN. And in this respect, almost coming full circle in my presentation, inasmuch as the discussion of the institutional evolution of ICANN must be led by ICANN, there is a huge role for the IGF at the global level and at the national and regional levels as a sounding board, as an outreach mechanism to allow everybody to be aware of what is happening in ICANN and also to be able to input. And France, and I hope other European Union actors, will strongly help facilitate this kind of discussion. So as a conclusion, I want to highlight this notion of a internet governance network. There's a protocol that allows heterogeneous networks to interconnect and create the internet. It's the IP protocol. There's a protocol that allows heterogeneous information systems to interconnect and create the World Wide Web. It's the HTTP HTML protocol. As I've done in other conferences, there is an interesting intellectual question is what is the governance protocol that allows heterogeneous governance frameworks to interoperate and address together the kind of challenges that we have at hand. I suggest that as the IP protocol and the HTML protocol were designed mostly in research centers, it is likely that the governance protocol is going to come from research centers as well. And in that respect, I'm looking forward to some of the discussions that will take place in Charm the day before the IGF in the GigaNet Symposium, which is an academic network dealing with internet governance issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Bertrand, for setting up to our attention the different level of problems related to the various role of ICANN, IGF, and what is going to happen in the future on this matter.